see you guys in the dark.
I grew up going to private American school in a foreign country in Europe, which I shall not name. The school was situated kind of in the middle of a big hill, and even further above the school was something really special, an abandoned prison. Now, as if that was not shady enough, bordering the abandoned prison was a real prison. There was kind of like a wall separating the real prison from the abandoned one. Us being teenagers, we have decided to find a way to break into the abandoned part. We had already gotten beyond the second layer of the wall. There were a total of 3, and the wall ran all the way around with barbed wire in many places. One lunch break, I heroically managed to tear down a huge section of the wall during lunch, but the next day we arrived, and it was patched up by someone. That didn't stop us, though. We climbed on through anyways, and decided to do some exploring. Now, this happened over the course of many, many months, and it took us ages to work up the courage to finally get inside. A bunch of us were doing AP 2D art, and had our cameras with us at all times to get some shot. Half of my best work came from this prison. But one day, an event happened that made all of us swear to never go back. You can see some more of our exploring later on. As I mentioned, we did this over months, so sometimes there's snow, sometimes we're in light clothing. We took pictures of notebooks and logs we found, but I won't post them due to keeping the country unknown. So as months and months went by, we got more and more confident wandering around the prison. We never went in too deep, and we were always scared of getting close to the wall with the real prison because there were always security guards around. Sometimes we would run into some gypsies scrapping for metal, sometimes a random homeless person or two, but nothing ever too dangerous. Once a couple of guys got busted by security, and we didn't go back for weeks. But eventually we learned the schedule of the guards, and befriended the homeless who hung around there, so we were pretty comfortable. 2 years went by of some exploring here and there, until one night a friend and I decided to go there to do some late-night shooting. We dressed up, organized our things, by one of the holes at the entry at midnight. We had videos of us going through some of the sections of the prison that night, but we deleted them out of fear. We never wanted to have anyone know what happened this night, and thought the videos would be traced back to us. It was really, really dark in the depths of the prison, so the reason we were filming was to use the flashlight on our iPhones. This was a little while back, and you couldn't just press a button to get the light on, but had to film something. Our goal tonight was to get as high up as we could. There were at least 10 floors, and almost all the staircases we had found during our daily exploration were sealed off. If we spent lunch breaking one down, the next day it would just be repaired again. The prison was huge, and had many staircases all over the place. I will have access to all the pictures in a few months. Now most of the rooms were fairly large. Each floor was completely different to the previous one, and it was very hard to tell what went on here. From what we could gather, it was some sort of labor factory the prisoners were forced to work in. We found some rooms completely full of shoe soles. Another floor had a long hallway, and each room was vividly painted in different patterns. Some rooms had a lot of mattresses stacked to each other. You get it, a whole lot of creepy-ass rooms with random creepy stuff. Every new floor we explored was a totally new surprise. And it became more and more difficult to find ways to go higher up, but eventually we found it. And that is what we came there to do that night, get to the roof. As I mentioned, this prison was on a hill, so the view was bound to be fantastic, and we thought at night the guards will have a harder time spotting us. So back to the night. Kept getting deeper and deeper, and it just got darker and darker. There were dripping noises everywhere around us, and we couldn't tell if we were alone. We got to our desired staircase as we climbed up. There became fewer and fewer windows until we were climbing up into pitch darkness. I'm shaking as I'm even typing this, remembering the pure terror I felt. Nonetheless, it was the only unsecured entrance, so we kept climbing up. Things started to get really weird. The stairs were in the form of a zigzag with no railing, so you could fall down the middle. To get to the staircase, you had to go through a long and dark hallway. So once you're at the bottom of the stairs, there is almost no light. Soon we began to realize that at the end of each zigzag, there were these holes in the wall. To get through one, you'd have to pull yourself up into it, because it was just a tiny slit at the top. We flipped a coin, and it was decided I was to go through. I wish I never had. I pray to God that I had never had. I crawled through and hopped inside into a box-like confinement with no windows or anything. You couldn't fully stand up. You had to either lie down or squat. I looked around and found pornography splattered all over the walls of this place, as well as tissues and other disgusting stuff. Injection needles were among one of the things there was too, and I believe I have a picture of that somewhere. That wasn't the worst part, though. The worst part was when I took a look at the notebook lying on the ground. The writing was in a foreign language which I could read, and it documented a worker's logs. There was a name followed by a sign-in and sign-out timestamp. The most recent entry was made 2 days ago. 2 freaking days ago. I rushed out of that space like my life depended on it, and told my friend we've got to get out of here. While I was inside, my friend noticed that there was one of those slits on every level, and that they were numbered, and had a placeholder for a tag. They were cells. We noped out of there, and began climbing down. I reasoned to my friend that it's almost 1 a.m., and that we need to go up now before it's too late. We were going to go to a club after this. Teenagers, right? It took me some time after, but finally I persuaded him to go back up and make it to the roof, then leave. We went up and up until finally we saw a light. Delighted, we burst through the doors completely without thinking, and began expressing our relief in cries of joy. We felt like we had conquered the worst part and completely relaxed. Everything was going great until suddenly my friend freezes in his tracks and tells me to shut the hell up right now and get to the staircase. Panicked, I asked him what he's on about. The staircase that we had just come from had like a little house over it, if that makes any sense, and he was looking at something over the edge of the corner. You kind of see what I mean if you looked at the pictures. Then I hear another voice, which is definitely not my friend's. We were both these 2 fairly well-off kids from American upbringings, and the man was speaking a foreign language. Luckily I can understand it, but we like to frequently pretend that I did not just to fuck with the locals and spy on people. He was used to me routinely pretending I don't understand a word, so when the man said something, he just stayed quiet and motioned that I keep my mouth shut. A friend was signaling me to get to the staircase when I heard the man yell, "Don't move," in the foreign language. I froze dead and didn't know what to do. 5 men came from around the house thingy into my sight. 2 were standing, the others were sitting on the curb of the roof. One push, and they tumbled down to their deaths. Now these guys looked serious. Pumped arms, sweatpants, bandanas, and for the best part, swastikas on their arms. The prisoner had a lot of racist, general type of stuff going on. This we never expected, though. The man motions to me and yells, "Come here." I nervously tell him in English that I do not understand. I don't know how I thought this would help, but I speak quite a bit of German, and I suppose in my logical brain, I thought maybe they would do less harm to two Germans. By luck, my friend happened to be Swiss and spoke it fluently. The man yells to us, "What language you speaking?" I replied, "Deutsch." My friend looks over at me panicking, desperate to know what our next move should be. "Ah, Germans," and the group laughs. I hear one of the men say to the others in the foreign language, "They've seen the products." The head of the gang looks at us and comes closer. It was really dark, so I couldn't see what they had circled around, but there were black gym bags at their feet. "Come closer," he says to both of us. We come up closer to the group, and the man starts asking us questions in English. Who we are, why we're there. He then started asking personal questions, our full names, where we live, etc. The questions we clearly directed at making it easier to find out as much as we know as they can. Neither of us had money, but we both had our iPhones on. We had no idea what they had planned for us next. One of the sitting guys gets up and asks me, "Did you see anything?" "No," I shakily reply. Then he comes to my friend and asks him the same. For a brief moment, I glanced over at the bags, and I suddenly wish I would be anywhere but there. Hell, I'd rather be in that cell than here. I wish we had never come back here. I think you can guess what was in the bags. Guns. Not just one gun, but guns. As in bags and bags of what was probably illegal firearms. In a smaller bag to the side, there was a ton of rolled up cash. We just stumbled into an illicit firearm deal. The guy now started discussing amongst each other about what they are going to do with us. They didn't know that I understood every single word. One of them kept pleading, we're just stupid kids, and if they rough us up a bit, we won't tell anyone. Another one insists they take us to Gustav. I'm happy I never met Gustav. Meanwhile, I was trying to come up with an escape plan. The real prison was visible from where we were standing, but by the time the security guards from there would get up here, we would be dead. The staircase where we came from was pitch black, and we would stumble our way down and probably hurt ourselves. Either way, we end up dead. So I go for plan C. Mr. Ringleader says to them that one of them should walk us home to see where we really live, and threaten us if we tell anyone. That's when I had a better idea. The roofs. We could run back down the stairs, but the abandoned prison complex was huge, and basically many buildings of different sizes all near each other. You could hop down from roof to roof and escape via that way. Just as one of them starts arguing about taking us to Gustav, one of their phones rings, and I take that as my cue. I scream, "Follow me," to my friend, and began descending down the roofs. Now I know this is stupid logic, but I thought they'd never shoot us. Near a real prison at least. It's just too risky. Really wasn't too difficult. We just kept jumping on a lower and lower building, and eventually we were down. Our feet hit the ground, and we began running through the grounds. Since I knew it quite well, I knew exactly where to run to escape to a main road on the other side of the hill. I suddenly heard men yelling in the background, and the sound of barking dogs. Security from the real prison must have seen us running, and came to see who was there. I screamed to them in the foreign language, "There's men, and they've got guns!" It seemed they already knew we were not the primary concern, as they ran in the direction we came from, and not where we were going. We didn't stop running until we reached the city center, and we didn't return to that prison. We never reported anything that happened, and have no follow-up on who the men were. Illegal drugs and stuff were common where we were living. Never thought to find guns. To be honest, though, it wasn't the first time we heard about weapons dealing going down. It's hushed up, but not that hard to get your hands on where we live. We didn't go back for months, needless to say. To think that roof could have been the last thing that I saw, or Gustav's apartment. To visualize where things went down, the staircase section is actually half of that tower, so the windows on the left were separated. Also, you couldn't climb up the staircase from the bottom because it would be totally sealed off. So you would have to climb up to the next floor via another staircase somewhere else in the complex. The last couple of floors of the staircase were not sealed off, and that's where we found all the cells. I hate to say that I have another story to tell. You'll notice that it's been a while since this has happened, but for legal reasons, I was not allowed to talk publicly about it due to the severity of the event. But I have been granted permission to speak publicly about it. There's no news story about it, at least, not yet anyway. It'll all make sense, so here it goes. This is going to be a long one, just an FYI. I'm a 21-year-old male. It was July 4th of 2019. I live in Kansas in the USA. At the time, I worked as a corrections officer at the maximum security prison on a night shift. The cell house I was in charge of was the maximum general population. 1 man to a cell. This is where murders and overall the worst of society were housed. Before work, I was doing the typical American 4th of July thing. Grilling, blowing up fireworks, had a beer or two, having a great time with my now wife and family. My wife kept telling me I needed to just call in sick and take the day without pay. I said no, because we were a little behind on some bills. I really wish I had listened to her now. As the night went on, it came time for us to leave my mom's, and for me to go home and get ready for work. I took my wife home and dropped her off, got ready, and left for work. My wife's car was broken down, so she was stuck at home for the night. As I drove to work, which was about an hour drive away, I watched the fireworks going off all around me. It was sad. I had never had to work on the 4th of July before. After I got to work and got all my equipment, I got into the cell house. Business as usual. Inmates were showered and locked up. I got my night cleaning crew out so they could clean the rest of the cell house and meet up with my partner for the night in the officer's station to get our briefing from the last shift. Fast forward about an hour into my shift, so it's now right around 12:30 a.m. Another officer came into the cell house. Now there's 3 of us. This happened often on night shift, as there was nothing to do except rounds every half hour or so. Out of nowhere, we hear an inmate laughing like a witch, like a cackling noise. That was strange, but nothing to be alarmed with. Drugs were a bad problem in that facility. Still is, as far as I know. Eventually, after a few more cackles, I decided to go see who was making the sound, in case they were high. I walked through and checked all 200 inmates. Nothing. There were a small few that were even awake at this hour. So, I brushed it off and just went back to my office. My partner and the other sheriff were asking if there was anyone that needed their cells searched. I couldn't think of anyone in particular that I could have suspected of having anything. So I went and checked all the cells again to see if I can get a whiff of smoke or see something. As I was walking on the 2nd-story cell run, I found an inmate that was acting pretty weird. He was in his bed facing the wall, talking. This was also common, as there were a lot of inmates with minor mental illnesses. I figured he was high because he turned and looked at me and told me to just fuck off. I was going to leave him alone, but the disrespect made me change my mind. The time is now 12:40 a.m., July 5th. I walked back to the office and tell the other officers which cell he was in, and I wanted him searched. Cell 218. So how the house is laid out is there are 100 cells per level. From the officer station, you can see the north side, 1st and 2nd floor, but you can't see the south side unless you walk the 50 feet over to it. Picture the movie Shawshank Redemption type cell house, except instead of being able to look through and see the cells across, you just see a wall. The cells are literally back to back. As the officers go to pull him out of his cell to search it, I went to the ground floor and was watching from below. Reason why? I wanted to get the inmate on the ground level and not the 2nd floor. All that was there for protection from going over the edge was a handrail. I noticed the inmate was taking forever to get out of his cell. He came out in shorts and a do-rag, which is weird because he wasn't fully clothed. He didn't even have sandals on, just shorts and a do-rag, yet took 5 minutes to get out. That made me nervous. The inmate was 6 foot tall, maybe about 250 pounds, muscle-bound dude. T definitely had size on us, so from the ground I holler at him and tell him to come down to the ground, and that he could use the phone or check his email or commissary. He declined my offer, which never happens. I knew something was up. He was watching them search his cell from the control panel box. This was definitely alarming. They were in his cell. I was on the ground. He could have easily ambushed them. He would have made it to them before I could get up to the stairs. So to try to keep them safe, I went upstairs to the inmate. He was standing in the corner away against the handrails at the top of the stairs. He knew I was the OIC, which is the officer in charge of that cell house, and he knew I was the one that saw him talking to himself. He asked me why I was having his cell searched. I lied and said, "It's nothing personal, man. I have a quota I have to fill for the cell search in a night, and you were awake, so I chose you to have searched. It'll just take a second, I promise." He was uneasy. He was pacing around. Something was wrong. Then I saw it. He had turned just right, and I saw on his do-rag the Samsung logo reflecting the cell house light. Shit. I knew there was going to be a problem as soon as I saw it. He had a cell phone on him. I called over the radio for 2 additional officers to come to me. The inmate didn't seem to notice I made the call. My supervisors responded, saying 2 of them were on their way. Side note, at this time, only segregation officers had protective vests. So out of the 5 of us that were now in there, only 1 had a vest. I was not that one. The officers were, names changed. South had a vest. McCormick, Collins, Sheffield, and me. The time is now 12:58 a.m. As soon as South and McCormick get up to me, I told the inmate to turn around and cuff him. South and McCormick were on the inmate's right side. I was in front of him. Why? He angrily asked me. I refused to give him a reason at first. After a few minutes, I had enough. I told him, "Look, man, I can see the cell phone in your do-rag. You know you're not supposed to have that." The inmate then gets a defeated look on his face, but fire in his eyes. His body relaxes, and he slowly reaches up to retrieve the phone. But does he pull out a phone? Nope. He pulls out a 6-inch sharpened metal rod with a ripped fabric wrapped around the bottom as a handle. Everything froze for me. I knew I was going to die. Everything starts moving again. I now have an inmate twice my size, charging me, thrusting quickly, and repeatedly towards me. "Oh, shit," was all that I managed to yell. I immediately went into defensive mode, trying to grab his arm and disarm him. His wrist kept slipping. I couldn't keep a hold of it, but at least I managed to block his attempts at my lower abdomen. Suddenly, he aimed high and went for my chest. I felt it make contact. I had just been stabbed in the right part of my chest. "Spray him!" I yelled at the top of my lungs. McCormick was already working on spraying the MK9 OC spray. For my military readers, you know what I mean. For others, MK9 comes as a pressured spray bottle about 20 fluid ounces. You can buy it at camping stores in the USA. It's called bear spray. It's the stuff that you spray in bears' eyes so that you can get away. South had come up behind the inmate and grabbed around his chest and pulled him backwards right as McCormick sprayed. I didn't realize it at the time, but the spray hit me. The inmate and South, as well as everyone near us. I was able to turn and run. I ran around the stair railing, past the panel box, and out onto the run of the cells on the 2nd story. I ran past a few cells and turned around to see he wasn't chasing me. But South was wrestling him to the ground while gagging on the OC, as was I and McCormick. Sheffield, having heard the commotion, came around out of the cell, saw what was happening, and ran in to help. The inmate grabbed South by the vest and tried to throw him over the end of the landing, but South dropped to his knees before he went over. I grabbed my shoulder mic and screamed into it, "Level A response to Charlie 2, now!" Dispatch had something back, but I didn't hear it. I started to charge back to help save South. Before I could get away from the cell, I was in front of Collins. He grabbed me from behind and told me not to go. Due to the layout of the runs, I didn't see, but Sheffield grabbed the inmate from behind and body slammed him on his face and began cuffing him immediately. Sheffield got covered in OC as well due to the inmate being covered in it. As soon as Collins let me go, I stood still and watched. Up the stairs came 4 more officers, the captain and the lieutenant. The LT came and asked me what happened. I started to explain, but he cut me off after he saw blood coming out of my left arm. After taking me out of the cell house, he made me lift my shirt because he saw the blood. He examined all my wounds. He had me remove all my equipment and hold paper towels to my arm. I was rushed to the ER. I was able to grab my phone out of my rental car. I had totaled my car a few weeks prior by hitting a deer. I called my wife and told her what happened. She called my parents and my siblings. Luckily, my injuries weren't that bad. I was only stabbed 4 times. Once on my left arm, just below the elbow. That was a through and through. Blade went in one side and out the other. Twice in the top of my left hand, and one that hit my chest went in my skin and hit one of my ribs, keeping it out of my lungs at least. Out of 37 plunges, I think it's safe to say I'm lucky to be here writing this story. I didn't sleep for 2 days following this event. I still have nightmares almost daily. I'm almost paranoid at this point. I openly carry a gun now. After my attack, I was forced to resign for safety reasons. Everyone statewide that works in maximum prisons now have vests. None of the people from there talk to me anymore. I feel kind of abandoned. I have one guy from that facility that I still see, my sergeant who wasn't there that night. Court is coming soon to add 3 more attempted murders on this guy. Turns out he was a shot caller for the Crips gang. If any law enforcement guys read or hear this story, please watch your 6. Never be afraid to have backup with you. And to the fucker that stabbed me, I hope for your sake that we never meet again, aside from court, because I have a hollow point with your name scratched right into it. This started back in 2015, maybe 2016-ish. I try to blur most of his identity from my memory. During this time, a good friend of mine was working for a local chain restaurant, and one afternoon she invited me and another friend to come by for a St. Patty's Day drink after our shift at work. When we arrived, all fun and dandy, she got a couple of drinks, and everyone there was nice and respectful. Next thing I know, she comes over and points to a group of guys at the bar that were around my age, saying that they really want to say hi, so they asked me to come over. Let's just say this would have been my first red flag. But I was young and loved meeting new people, and thought, hey, these guys look innocent enough. Fast forward a few months later, and me and my friends were now really close with this group of 3 guys. Alec, the sweet one, James, the weird one, and Dan, the main story. We spent a ton of time together, always laughing and nothing awkward. These guys felt like brothers. A few weeks later, this Dan decided to profess his affection for me via Facebook Messenger. After politely telling me that I saw him more as a brother rather than a lover, he then decided to threaten me by saying he would, and I quote, "kill myself if you don't date me." Safe to say that I decided it was best to take some space from this whole group. After a few weeks of ignoring messages and asking for space, I finally caved and decided to talk it out, hoping things would maybe be normal again. Boy, was I mistaken. Alec and James slowly backed off and appreciated my space. To this day, I respect them for doing this while still being friends with Dan. On the other side of things, Dan continued to message me, telling me he missed me and that I was like a sister to him. The messages became more persistent than ever after multiple back and forths, asking him to leave me alone. He still refused to acknowledge that I no longer wanted contact. It got back to the extent that I had to block him on everything so that I wouldn't receive texts, Insta DMs, and messages on all platforms. Then he took it to the next level. Dan decided to change his phone number. Not once, not twice, 4 times. All so that he could message me. I couldn't believe the extent that he would go just to get me back as a friend, even after multiple threats that I would call the cops. On top of changing phone numbers, he would create new Facebook and Instagram pages, changing his name, using fake images or old ones. I have at least 2 to 5 profiles blocked on my Insta and Facebook. Finally, I thought it was over, until I received a message from my 2 friends Megan and Ashley, along with calls from both of my sisters. Hey, so is Dan trying to add me on Insta? My middle sister, Beth, even got messages saying, "Hey, why won't Gina talk to me?" Along with multiples of the same messages to all of them. I was fucking fuming. It's one thing to harass me, but now, my family? Now I'm bringing it to my parents, who are not only scared for me, but scared he will show up at the house. He knew where I lived at the time. 2 years of this went by before I decided to do something. Now I know people may think, why did you wait so long? But it was really hard for me, and because I blocked and deleted so many messages, I didn't feel like I had the evidence to go to the police and file for harassment, as much as I wanted to. In early 2016, I noticed a profile. It was old pics of Dan, and all of his Facebook friends were youngish girls. I took a video of it and sent it to my sister to warn them in case he tried to contact them. In 2016, I met my current boyfriend, Harrison, my best friend and #1 fan. Luckily during this, Dan only tried to add me on Insta once. I then deleted and never heard from him again. I assumed at this point he found a girl or realized he needed help. In October of 2018, everything changed. A new guy started at my job who looked exactly like this guy. This was super triggering, so I texted Harrison right away so he could help me calm down. Not even 2 minutes later, he goes, "Have you Googled Dan recently?" Which of course I haven't. So of course I did. My jaw dropped. Dan pleaded guilty last year to incitement of a minor. I started shaking. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had to look up 5+ articles to believe it. I couldn't process whether I was feeling guilty for not seeing this sooner or if I felt relief. I called my mom and cried. I couldn't process this. I spent so much of my life being mentally harassed by someone, and for some reason blamed myself for this happening. I saw this page. I filmed it. I could have done something. I could have prevented this. Dan's sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. This is my letter to him. Dear Dan, how could you? How could you hurt so many people? This girl, her family, your family. I'm still in shock, and I'm mad. You've done so much damage to so many good people. You've scarred families, friends, co-workers. For what? You are lonely. I hope you enjoy being lonely forever. Enjoy the cold walls of your cell. They match your heart. I wish I could see you one more time. I want to look you in the fucking eyes. I want an answer. Why? Why did you make me feel so scared? Why did you make this little girl believe you? Why? When I was in 6th grade, I met R. He bullied me relentlessly. He would punch me, verbally abuse me, all 9 yards. But somehow I became friends with him. I have no idea how. After he stopped bullying me, nothing bad really happened till I reached the 7th grade. I made a new friend named Leslie. We're still friends to this day, and I love her to death. Anyways, R and Leslie and I all were in the same friend group as each other on the bus, since we all lived in the same neighborhood. R started to exhibit some really weird behaviors. On the bus, he would take a pencil, lead to his skin, and cut himself, or attempt to at least. At this point in time, I myself was struggling with self-harm and suicidal behavior, so this pissed me off. I told him off, and he told me it was the demons that made him do it. Weird, I know. This was also when Pokemon Go was really popular, and on more than one occasion I'd be outside my house, because I liked to make musical outside. And his car would pull up in front of my house, stay there for about 10 minutes, and then drive away. Every time I would confront R about it, he would say, "Oh, we were just hunting Pokemon." Yeah, right, dude. He started to date my friend N. He would force her to kiss him when she wasn't comfortable with it. It was constantly taking advantage of her mental state, since she had autism. They broke up eventually. In 8th grade, my homeroom teacher hands me a note. He says some kid gave it to him, and it had my name on it, so I open it and read it. It basically said, "OP, I'm in love with you. I would kill for you. I would shoot and stab everyone for you. If you don't like me back, I'm going to end myself." Along those lines. And I freaked out. Up until that point, I had a crush on him. I didn't anymore. I went to the counselor, I can't remember her name, and gave her the note. He wasn't there for a week, and came back acting as if nothing happened. This is where it gets juicy. Fast forward to 9th grade, aka last year in 2017, in October. He got on the bus, and I moved out of the way so he could sit down since we sat together. He turned to me and said, which I remember word for word, "Last night I had a dream about you, OP. I dreamt I was stabbing you in your back, your blood on my hands, and you dying in my arms." I freaked out and laughed it off, thinking he was just joking. He wasn't. He turned to a page in his book, and it was a drawing of him stabbing me, down to my scarred facial expression and everything. I freaked out and told the counselor, Miss S. She immediately told me to write a statement, so I did. I went home and my mom got a call from Mr. B, who told her what had happened. They wanted her in the school the next day for a meeting. This is where it gets fuzzy for me, since my brain tried to block this all out, since this was a traumatic moment for me. I told the administration, my mom, Miss S, and Miss R what had happened. They told me that they would take care of it. So I went along the school day and went home. He still rode my bus. So I started to sit way in the back because I was terrified of him and scared that he would hurt me. I suffer from PTSD, from abuse and a shooting I was in as a child, paranoia, suicidal thoughts, and self-harm behavior. My mental state deteriorated. I started to self-harm again, and I had to be admitted to a hospital in January of 2018. He was also admitted to the same hospital, different times apart. He was still on my bus 3 months later after the incident. My mom was furious. She's a mama bear, and took me down to school early. This was the following conversation between Mom, Mr. B, and Mr. G. I didn't say much. Mom, why is R still on OP's bus? Mr. B told her, because we don't see any reason to take him off her bus. My mom, he threatened to kill her. That's not a reason in itself. Keep in mind, R admitted to threatening me and showed them the drawing. Mr. G, we don't see him as a threat. This is heavily important later. Mom, so he threatened to kill someone. No disciplinary action happened, and he has to stay on his victim's bus. She turned to me. It's like we're in the Twilight Zone. Yes, she actually said that. Mr. G sighs. Ma'am, there's nothing that we can do. He's legally supposed to ride that particular bus. Mom, OP is a sitting duck on that bus if he chooses to bring a weapon. Mr. G sighs. Well, what can we do? The following week, with my mom harassing them daily, he was finally off my bus. A few weeks later, R reported to them we were not allowed to go near each other, that I was purposely walking towards him and sitting at the same table as him. So I was called into a meeting with my mom, both counselors, and the administration. This is just a rundown, Mrs. S. We brought this guy in here today because R was reported that OP purposely has been sitting at the same breakfast table as him and walking near him. I said, no, I sat at that table because that's where I've sat since September, and that's where my friends are. I walk near him so I can get to class on time without being tardy. Mrs. R. Well, it's empowering as a woman to avoid your abuser and walk a different route to sit at a different table. This pissed me off to no extent, and it still does. I don't remember anything after that because I broke down crying. I shut down completely and pulled my head into my lap. I do remember my mom yelling at the counselors and administrators because of this. I never saw R again after that. Fast forward to this year, 2018, I'm a 10th grader now. In October, I get the news from a mutual friend of ours that he was stalking her and threatened to shoot up the school, and was now in jail. Remember how I said that Mr. G said he wasn't a threat? It's now March, and he's expelled and is on probation. He still lives in my neighborhood, but if I ever need to, or if he talks to me again, I will not hesitate to get a restraining order and press charges. R, let's not meet ever again.